I never imagined that my sister Emma's wedding reception would become the stage for exposing the most devastating betrayal of my life. The crystal chandeliers cast warm light across the elegant ballroom as 300 guests enjoyed their salmon dinners and champagne toasts. Everything seemed perfect until my mother Patricia suddenly stood up, tapped her wine glass with a silver spoon, and made an announcement that would change everything forever. She smiled broadly and declared to the entire room that I would be covering Emma and Derek's $27,000 honeymoon to Europe because I could easily afford it with my trust fund. The conversation stopped. Every eye turned toward me. My face burned with humiliation as I felt the weight of their expectant stares. The silence stretched uncomfortably as Emma and her new husband Derek beamed at me with hopeful expressions. Derek's wealthy parents, the Andersons, nodded approvingly from their table near the dance floor. Uncle Robert raised his champagne glass in my direction, waiting for my generous response. My hands trembled as I reached into my navy blue suit jacket and withdrew a manila folder that I had been carrying for 3 years. "Let me check my trust fund balance," I said, my voice steady despite the earthquake happening inside my chest. I opened the folder and spread the legal documents across the white linen tablecloth. Bank statements, withdrawal slips, transfer records, and court filings created a paper trail of betrayal that stretched back 7 years. The guests closest to our family table leaned forward, curiosity replacing their earlier enthusiasm. 3 years ago, when I turned 25, I went to access my trust fund to pay for medical school. I began, my voice carrying across the now silent ballroom. My father established this fund before he died when I was 12. It contained $150,000 specifically designated for my higher education. Patricia's confident smile began to falter. She glanced nervously toward the exit doors, but she was trapped by the circular table arrangement and curious guests. Instead of finding my education fund, I discovered these. I held up a stack of forged withdrawal slips. Systematic theft over 6 years. Unauthorized transfers. Forged signatures. My own mother had been using my social security number and personal information to drain every penny from my inheritance. Emma gasped dramatically, pressing her manicured hand to her chest. "Alfred, what are you talking about? This is my wedding day." I continued methodically, like the medical technician I'd become instead of the doctor I was supposed to be. These bank records show regular withdrawals starting when I was 19 and studying abroad in London. Someone was making transactions using my identification while I was 3,000 miles away. Derek's father, a prominent attorney named James Anderson, adjusted his wire-rimmed glasses and studied the documents I was displaying. His expression shifted from confusion to grave concern as he recognized authentic legal paperwork. The handwriting analysis is in this folder. I explained, pulling out another set of documents. Expert testimony confirming that my signature was forged on dozens of withdrawal authorizations. Security footage from First National Bank showing exactly who made these unauthorized transactions. Patricia finally found her voice. "Alfred, honey, you're confused. This is neither the time nor the place for this kind of discussion." "Actually, Mother, this is the perfect time." I stood up slowly, addressing the 300 wedding guests who were now completely focused on our family drama. "Because the money you stole from my trust fund paid for this wedding." The revelation hit the ballroom like a physical force. Derek's mother, Catherine Anderson, dropped her champagne glass, sending crystal fragments across the polished marble floor. The crash echoed through the stunned silence. The catering bill, the flowers, the band, the venue rental, Emma's dress, the photographer, the open bar, everything. I gestured around the opulent ballroom with its gold-trimmed walls and elaborate floral arrangements. Total cost $143,000, funded entirely by my stolen inheritance. Emma burst into tears, but they seemed more frustrated than sorrowful. "How could you ruin my special day like this? I worked so hard planning this celebration. Derek stood beside his new bride, his face pale with dawning comprehension. Emma, is this true? Did you know about this money? I don't know what he's talking about, Emma sobbed, but her eyes avoided making contact with anyone at the table. James Anderson cleared his throat professionally. Young man, these are serious accusations. Do you have verification of these claims? I pulled out the final document from my folder. Criminal complaint filed with the district attorney's office 2 weeks ago. Case number 77492. Identity theft fraud and elder abuse charges pending against Patricia Matthews and Emma Matthews Henderson. Patricia's face went completely white. She gripped the edge of the table so tightly that her knuckles matched her pale complexion. You filed criminal charges against your own family. You committed criminal acts against your own family, I replied calmly. I simply documented them. The wedding reception transformed into a battlefield within seconds. Patricia exploded from her chair like a rocket, lunging across the elegant table setting and scattering wedding favor centerpieces and dinner plates in every direction. Her perfectly styled gray hair came loose from its elaborate updo as she clawed desperately for the legal documents in my hands. You're a liar! She shrieked, her voice echoing off the ballroom's vaulted ceiling. You're trying to destroy your sister's happiness because you're jealous and bitter. I held the papers above my head while she grabbed at my suit jacket, her fingernails leaving scratch marks on the expensive fabric. Several male guests rushed over to restrain her, including Derek's uncle Thomas, who owned a construction company and had the physical strength to contain Patricia's fury. Emma's sobs turned into hysterical wailing that could be heard throughout the entire venue. Her elaborate white gown, which had cost $8,000 according to my financial records, was now stained with mascara tears and red wine from the overturned glasses. She collapsed into her chair, hyperventilating between accusations. Alfred is sick in the head. She screamed at her new in-laws. He's been obsessed with money ever since Dad died. He probably spent his trust fund on drugs and gambling. Derek's parents exchanged horrified glances. Catherine Anderson whispered urgently to her husband, James, did we just witness our daughter-in-law's family commit felonies? The elegant string quartet stopped playing mid-song their classical music, replaced by shouting voices and breaking glass. Wedding guests began gathering their purses and evening jackets, clearly uncomfortable with the violent family confrontation unfolding before them. Uncle Robert, Patricia's younger brother, tried unsuccessfully to mediate the chaos. His normally calm demeanor cracked as he processed the implications of my accusations. Patricia, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't steal from your own son. It's all lies, Patricia continued, struggling against the men restraining her. Alfred is mentally unstable. He needs psychiatric help. I remained standing, methodically organizing the scattered documents that had survived Patricia's attack. My voice stayed level, despite the emotional storm swirling around me. Uncle Robert, would you like to see the bank surveillance footage? The police have copies showing Mother and Emma making withdrawals together on 17 different occasions. Derek suddenly grabbed Emma's shoulders, forcing her to look directly at him. Emma, I need you to tell me the truth right now. Did you know about this money? Emma's hyperventilating intensified. Between gasping breaths, she managed to choke out more denials. I don't know anything about Alfred's stupid trust fund. The wedding photographer, a middle-aged woman named Linda, who had been documenting the celebration, quietly packed her camera equipment. She had captured the entire confrontation on film, but clearly realized these were not memories the family would want preserved. Meanwhile, the jazz band began disconnecting their sound equipment, creating additional noise and confusion. The lead singer approached the microphone one final time. Thank you, folks. We're going to take our break now. James Anderson pulled out his cell phone and stepped away from the chaos. I could hear him speaking in urgent professional tones to someone on the other end. Yes, this is James Anderson. I need to speak with someone from the district attorney's office immediately. We have a situation here. Derek's younger sister Sarah, who was Emma's maid of honor, gathered the other bridesmaids and ushered them toward the exit. "This is insane," she muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "What kind of family steals from each other?" Patricia finally broke free from the men holding her and pointed an accusatory finger at me. "You want to know the truth? Fine, your precious father left us with nothing but debt when he died. I did what I had to do to survive." The admission sent another shockwave through the remaining guests. Emma stopped crying abruptly, realizing that her mother had just confessed to the crime I was alleging. "Patricia," Uncle Robert stared at his sister in disbelief. "What did you just say?" But the most devastating revelation was yet to come. Emma suddenly stood up, her wedding dress rustling around her like damaged swan feathers. Her face was red and puffy from crying, but her voice became surprisingly clear and determined. "Fine. You want the truth, Alfred?" "Yes, I knew about the trust fund money. I helped Mom get it because she said you would never need it anyway. You were always the smart one, the one who could succeed without help. I deserved that money more than you did." The ballroom fell into absolute silence. Even the catering staff stopped their cleanup activities to stare at Emma's confession. Derek slowly released his grip on his new wife's shoulders and took several steps backward. "You what?" Emma seemed to realize too late that her emotional outburst had just destroyed any hope of maintaining her innocence. She looked around the ballroom at the faces of shocked wedding guests, many of whom were Derek's family and friends. She stammered, trying desperately to backtrack. But the damage was complete. Emma had just confessed to participating in identity theft and fraud in front of 300 witnesses at her own wedding reception. The ballroom's atmosphere shifted from chaotic family drama to criminal proceeding when Sheriff's Deputy Michael Torres entered through the main entrance doors. His black uniform and silver badge created a stark contrast against the elegant wedding decorations. Behind him walked Deputy Sarah Kim, both officers moving with the measured pace of law enforcement professionals, responding to a serious situation. "We're looking for Patricia Matthews and Emma Matthews Henderson." Deputy Torres announced, his voice carrying easily across the now quiet ballroom. Derek's father, James Anderson, approached the officers, his attorney instincts taking control of the situation. "Officers, I'm James Anderson, legal counsel. I called your department about potential criminal activity at this wedding reception." Deputy Torres nodded professionally. "Sir, we have arrest warrants for both individuals on charges of identity theft, fraud, and conspiracy. We understand they're both present at this location." The remaining wedding guests pressed against the walls of the ballroom, creating a clear pathway for the deputies. Many held their cell phones, recording what was certainly the most dramatic wedding reception in their experience. Patricia and Emma huddled together near the head table, both women looking like cornered animals. Emma's elaborate wedding gown suddenly seemed absurd in the context of an arrest situation. Her 20-foot train, which had required 3 bridesmaids to manage during the ceremony, now dragged behind her like evidence of excess purchased with stolen money. Patricia Matthews' Deputy Kim called out, reading from official paperwork. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." "This is a mistake," Patricia protested as the handcuffs clicked around her wrists. "My son is mentally ill? He's making false accusations because he's jealous of his sister's happiness?" Derek stood frozen beside his new bride, watching in horror as his wedding reception transformed into a crime scene. His expensive black tuxedo, which had cost $2,000 and been tailored specifically for this celebration, now seemed like a costume for a tragedy rather than a comedy. Emma Matthews Henderson. Deputy Torres continued approaching the bride with professional courtesy but unwavering authority. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit identity theft and fraud." Emma's knees buckled as the reality of her situation hit her. The handcuffs looked particularly shocking against her white satin gloves, which had been a gift from Derek's grandmother, Catherine. Derek's extended family watched in stunned silence as their new daughter-in-law was arrested at her own wedding reception. His cousin Michael whispered to his wife, "Should we call our lawyer about an annulment?" Meanwhile, I stood beside the evidence table I had created with my legal documents, finally feeling a sense of validation after 3 years of investigation and preparation. A man in a navy blue suit approached me with a confident stride and professional demeanor. "Alfred Matthews. I'm Marcus Sullivan, private investigator," he said, extending his hand for a firm handshake. "I've been working on your case for 18 months. We have additional evidence that I think will interest the district attorney." Marcus opened a leather briefcase and began spreading additional documents across the table. Financial records, bank statements, credit reports, and surveillance photographs created an even more damning picture of systematic fraud. "Your mother didn't just steal your trust fund," Marcus explained, his voice loud enough for the remaining guests to hear clearly. "She's been using your identity for a much larger fraud scheme." He held up a credit report with my name at the top. 17 unauthorized credit card applications. 6 fraudulent loans. A car lease for a BMW that your sister has been driving. Total fraudulent debt in your name, $312,000. Derek's face went completely white. "Emma drives a BMW. A $60,000 BMW X5. Marcus confirmed, consulting his notes. "Purchased using a loan application with Alfred's forged signature and fabricated employment information." The revelation hit Derek like a physical blow. He had been dating Emma for 3 years and never questioned how she could afford such an expensive vehicle on her claimed salary as a medical office assistant. But that's not the worst part. Marcus continued, clearly building toward a devastating climax. "Your mother has been telling creditors that you're legally responsible for these debts as her adult son. Your credit score has been destroyed. You've been denied student loans, apartment applications, and job opportunities because of fraudulent debt you never knew existed." James Anderson stepped forward, his attorney mind processing the legal implications. "Young man, do you have documentation proving these additional crimes?" Marcus pulled out a thick folder. Bank surveillance footage, handwriting analysis, witness statements, financial records, and recorded phone conversations with creditors. This case goes far beyond simple theft. Deputy Torres looked up from his arrest paperwork. "Sir, are you indicating there are additional charges we should be aware of?" "Identity theft on a massive scale," Marcus replied. "Wire fraud, credit fraud, elder abuse of Alfred's deceased father's estate. We're looking at federal charges in addition to state crimes." Patricia's struggles against her handcuffs intensified as she realized the full scope of her legal troubles. "You can't prove any of this. Alfred is lying." Emma seemed to be in complete shock, her eyes vacant, as she processed the end of her marriage, her freedom, and her future. The woman who had been a radiant bride just hours earlier now faced years in prison. Derek slowly removed his wedding ring and placed it on the head table among the scattered legal documents. "Emma, I trusted you completely. I thought I knew who you were." But the most shocking revelation was still to come. Marcus reached into his briefcase one more time and withdrew a set of insurance documents. "Alfred, there's something else you need to know about your father's death," he said gravely. "Your mother didn't just steal your trust fund. She also forged documents making herself the beneficiary of your father's life insurance policy. She stole an additional $75,000 that was meant for your education fund." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. My father had died when I was 12 years old, and I had trusted my mother to manage his affairs properly. Learning that she had stolen not just my trust fund, but also my father's final gift to secure my future felt like losing him all over again. Derek looked around the ballroom at his family and friends, all of whom were staring at him with expressions of pity and concern. His wedding day, which was supposed to be the happiest day of his life, had become a humiliating public exposure of his wife's criminal activities. "Officers," Derek said quietly, "I think I need to speak with an attorney about annulment procedures." As the deputies prepared to transport Patricia and Emma to the county jail, Marcus Sullivan continued unveiling evidence that revealed the true scope of their criminal conspiracy. He connected his laptop to the ballroom's audiovisual system, projecting financial documents onto the large screen that had earlier displayed wedding photos. Alfred, your family's theft goes back much further than we originally discovered, Marcus announced to the remaining wedding guests who had become an impromptu jury for this public trial. Patricia began stealing from your father's estate immediately after his funeral 7 years ago. The projection showed a timeline of fraudulent transactions starting just weeks after my father's death. Bank transfers, forged signatures, and unauthorized account access created a pattern of systematic theft that had continued for years without interruption. She opened credit cards in your name when you were only 18 and away at college. Marcus continued highlighting specific transactions on the screen. Student loans that never reached your school. Car payments for vehicles you never drove. Mortgage payments on properties you never owned. Derek's uncle Thomas, the construction company owner, studied the projected documents with professional interest. This woman has been running a financial fraud operation for almost a decade. Marcus clicked to the next screen, revealing Emma's role in the conspiracy. Emma wasn't just a passive beneficiary, she actively participated in the fraud scheme. Phone records show hundreds of calls between Patricia and Emma coordinating their stories and planning transactions. A recorded phone conversation began playing through the ballroom's speaker system. Emma's voice was clearly audible as she discussed forging my signature on loan applications. Make sure you practice Alfred's handwriting before we go to the bank, Emma's recorded voice instructed. And remember, if anyone asks, he's studying abroad and gave us power of attorney. Derek collapsed into a nearby chair, his head in his hands. The woman he had married just hours earlier was not only a thief, but an accomplished liar who had deceived him throughout their entire relationship. Your sister has been living completely beyond her means. Marcus explained, projecting Emma's actual financial records. No legitimate employment for the past 2 years. No college degree despite claiming to be a medical office assistant. Her entire lifestyle has been funded by stolen money from your trust fund and fraudulent credit applications. Catherine Anderson. Derek's mother approached the evidence table with tears in her eyes. We paid for the rehearsal dinner last night. $12,000. Did we unknowingly contribute to this criminal enterprise? Marcus consulted his notes sympathetically. Mrs. Anderson, your family were victims of this fraud just as much as Alfred. Emma and Patricia deliberately targeted your family because of your financial stability and social reputation. James Anderson was furiously typing notes on his phone, already preparing legal strategies. We need to document everything for potential civil litigation. This family has caused significant financial and reputational damage to our entire extended family. The projection changed to show property records and vehicle registrations. Patricia has been using Alfred's stolen identity to live in luxury while he struggled to pay for basic necessities, Marcus revealed. She upgraded to a 4-bedroom house in an exclusive neighborhood, leased expensive cars, and funded elaborate vacations, all while Alfred worked 3 jobs trying to afford community college classes. Uncle Robert stepped forward, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Patricia, I gave you $10,000 for Emma's wedding because you said the family was struggling financially. You told me Alfred was selfish and wouldn't help with wedding expenses. That was just another lie in a long series of deceptions, Marcus confirmed. Patricia has been manipulating family relationships for years, turning relatives against Alfred while she continued stealing from him. The evidence presentation continued with surveillance footage from various banks, showing Patricia and Emma making coordinated withdrawals and transactions. The video quality was crystal clear, showing both women laughing and celebrating as they accessed accounts using my stolen identity. Derek's father, James, stood up abruptly. I've heard enough. Derek, we need to file for emergency annulment proceedings immediately. This marriage was based on fraudulent misrepresentation of Emma's character and financial status. But Marcus held up his hand, indicating that the revelations weren't finished. There's one more thing everyone needs to know about this conspiracy. He clicked to a new screen showing a complex diagram of financial relationships and connections. Patricia and Emma didn't just steal Alfred's trust fund and destroy his credit. They also planned to use his identity to secure a business loan for $50,000 ostensibly to start a catering company. The loan application was scheduled to be submitted next week. Marcus continued highlighting specific documents. They were going to use Alfred's forged signature to secure additional funding, then declare bankruptcy, and disappear, leaving Alfred responsible for the debt. The calculation was breathtaking in its callousness. Patricia and Emma had planned to systematically destroy my financial future while building their own prosperity on stolen foundations. Derek looked up from his hands with red, watery eyes. Emma planned to start a catering business. She told me she wanted to be a stay-at-home wife. Another fabrication, Marcus confirmed. The business loan was actually intended to fund an extended European honeymoon and a down payment on a vacation home in Florida. The remaining wedding guests exchanged glances of disbelief and disgust. What had started as a celebration of love and commitment had been exposed as an elaborate criminal conspiracy funded by family betrayal. Sheriff's Deputy Torres looked up from his paperwork. Mr. Sullivan, will you be providing copies of this evidence to the district attorney's office? Everything has already been submitted, Marcus replied professionally. The federal authorities are also reviewing the case for potential wire fraud and interstate banking violations. Patricia and Emma, still in handcuffs, were led toward the exit doors. Patricia turned back one last time, her face twisted with rage and desperation. Alfred, you'll regret this for the rest of your life, she shouted. Family is supposed to forgive and forget you're destroying innocent people. But her words rang hollow in the ballroom, filled with evidence of her crimes. The woman who had raised me, who I had trusted and loved unconditionally, had systematically stolen my future while manipulating me into believing I was the problem. Derek stood up slowly and walked over to where I was standing beside the evidence table. His expensive tuxedo was wrinkled, and his bow tie hung loose around his neck. Alfred, he said quietly, I'm sorry this happened to you. Emma fooled all of us, but you're the one who suffered the most. As the deputies escorted Patricia and Emma out of the ballroom, the full scope of their betrayal settled over me like a heavy blanket. 7 years of systematic theft, manipulation, and identity destruction, all perpetrated by the two people who were supposed to love and protect me most. The elegant wedding reception with its crystal chandeliers and silk tablecloths had become the courtroom where justice finally began to emerge from years of hidden crimes. 3 days after the disastrous wedding reception, I discovered that Patricia and Emma's arrest was only the beginning of their desperate campaign to destroy my credibility and avoid criminal prosecution. From their jail cells, they launched a coordinated attack designed to paint me as an unstable, vindictive liar who had fabricated evidence to frame innocent family members. My phone started ringing at 6 in the morning with calls from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Aunt Linda, Patricia's older sister who lived in Phoenix, was the first to contact me with accusations. Alfred, your mother called me crying. Aunt Linda's voice was sharp with disapproval. She says you've been struggling with drug addiction and mental health problems. Is that why you're making up these horrible stories about her and Emma? I tried to explain the documented evidence, but Aunt Linda cut me off. Patricia said you spent all your trust fund money on gambling and drugs when you were in college. She said you're blaming her because you're ashamed of what you did. The phone calls continued throughout the morning. Cousin Jessica in Denver, Uncle Paul in Sacramento, my father's brother William in Texas. Patricia had managed to contact every family member spinning elaborate lies about my supposed mental illness and drug addiction. She sounds so convincing, Uncle William admitted during his call. Patricia says you've been having psychotic episodes and hallucinating about imaginary crimes. She's worried about your mental health. By noon, I realized the extent of Patricia's manipulation campaign. She had created detailed stories about my alleged psychiatric problems, complete with fabricated incidents and fictional medical treatments. According to her version, I had been secretly struggling with bipolar disorder and substance abuse for years. The strategy was diabolical in its effectiveness. Instead of defending against criminal charges, Patricia was attempting to discredit me as a reliable witness by claiming I was mentally incompetent. Emma's approach was equally manipulative, but focused on generating sympathy for her position. She called Derek's parents from jail sobbing hysterically about how I was destroying her marriage out of sibling jealousy. "James and Catherine, you have to help me," Emma pleaded during a recorded phone call that Derek's attorney later shared with me. "Alfred has always been jealous of my happiness. He's using fake documents to try to send me to prison because he can't stand seeing me succeed." Emma's story portrayed her as an innocent victim of her mentally ill brother's vindictive schemes. She claimed that I had forged the banking documents myself as part of an elaborate revenge plot against our family. The psychological warfare extended beyond family members. Patricia somehow managed to contact my employer at Memorial Hospital, where I worked as a medical technician in the emergency department. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, my supervisor, called me into her office on Thursday afternoon. Her expression was concerned and professional, but I could sense underlying suspicion in her demeanor. "Alfred, I received some disturbing phone calls about your personal situation," Dr. Martinez began carefully. "Someone claiming to be your mother says you're facing serious legal troubles related to financial fraud." My stomach dropped as I realized Patricia was trying to destroy my professional reputation along with my personal relationships. "Dr. Martinez, I'm the victim of the fraud, not the perpetrator. I have extensive documentation proving that my mother and sister stole my trust fund." "I hope that's true," Dr. Martinez replied, "but I have to inform you that several staff members have received similar phone calls. There are concerns about your emotional stability and whether personal stress might affect your job performance." The hospital administration placed me on administrative leave pending investigation of the fraud allegations. Losing my income while facing mounting legal expenses created additional financial pressure that Patricia had clearly anticipated as part of her counterattack strategy. Meanwhile, Derek was experiencing his own family crisis as Emma's manipulation campaign targeted his relatives and friends. She called Derek's sister Sarah, claiming that I had threatened physical violence against the entire family. "Sarah, you have to convince Derek not to get an annulment," Emma sobbed during their phone conversation. "Alfred is dangerous. He said he would hurt anyone who tries to help me. Derek needs to stand by his wife during this difficult time." Emma's lies were becoming increasingly desperate and elaborate. She claimed that I had been stalking her for months, that I had broken into her apartment to steal financial documents, and that I had threatened to kill her if she ever got married. Derek's family was confused and frightened by these conflicting stories. They had witnessed Emma's arrest at the wedding reception, but her tearful phone calls from jail were emotionally manipulative and convincing. Derek himself seemed torn between the evidence he had seen and Emma's passionate denials. He called me on Friday evening, his voice strained and uncertain. "Alfred, Emma swears that you're lying about everything. She says you forged those banking documents and that you're trying to frame her for crimes you committed yourself." I felt my heart sink as I realized that Emma's manipulation was working even on Derek, who had witnessed her confession at the wedding reception. "Derek, you were there. You heard Emma admit that she knew about the stolen money and helped Patricia access my trust fund." "I know what I heard," Derek replied. But Emma says she was confused and scared. She says you manipulated the situation to make her look guilty. The conversation revealed how effectively Emma was exploiting Derek's emotional attachment and desire to believe in her innocence. Even with overwhelming evidence of her crimes, she was using their relationship to create doubt about my credibility. The most devastating attack came when Patricia contacted my grandfather, William, my father's father, who had originally established my trust fund. Grandfather William was 83 years old and living in an assisted living facility in Dallas. His memory wasn't as sharp as it used to be, making him particularly vulnerable to Patricia's manipulation. "Alfred called me yesterday," Grandfather William said when I phoned him on Saturday morning. "Patricia explained everything about your drug problem and how you've been stealing money from the family to buy drugs." My heart broke as I heard the confusion and disappointment in my grandfather's voice. This was the man who had worked extra shifts at the steel mill to save money for my education fund. He had trusted Patricia to manage the trust fund properly after my father's death. "Grandfather, Patricia stole the money you saved for my education," I tried to explain gently. "I have bank records proving that she forged my signature and emptied the trust fund." "Patricia says you forged those bank records yourself," Grandfather William replied sadly. "She says you're very sick and need psychiatric help." "Alfred, why didn't you tell me you were struggling with mental illness?" The phone call left me devastated and isolated. Patricia had successfully turned my own grandfather against me, using his age and diminished memory to manipulate him into believing her lies. By Sunday evening, I felt completely alone. Family members who had known me my entire life were questioning my sanity and integrity based on Patricia's fabricated stories. My employer had suspended me pending investigation. Derek was wavering in his support despite witnessing Emma's crimes firsthand. Patricia and Emma's counterattack strategy was working exactly as they had planned. Instead of facing the overwhelming evidence of their guilt, they were successfully shifting focus to my alleged mental health problems and vindictive motivations. But they had underestimated my determination and the quality of evidence that Marcus Sullivan had gathered over 18 months of investigation. The truth was documented in bank records, surveillance footage, handwriting analysis, and recorded phone conversations that no amount of manipulation could explain away. Their desperate lies were about to collide with irrefutable facts, and the collision would destroy any remaining credibility they might have claimed. On Monday morning, I met with my attorney, Sarah Chen, and private investigator Marcus Sullivan to plan our comprehensive response to Patricia and Emma's manipulation campaign. Sarah's law office occupied the 20th floor of a downtown skyscraper with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, where my family's crimes had been systematically destroying my life for 7 years. "Alfred, their strategy is actually helping our case," Sarah explained, as she reviewed the weekend's developments. "Every lie they tell creates additional evidence of consciousness of guilt and obstruction of justice." Marcus had been monitoring Patricia and Emma's phone calls from jail, as all inmate conversations were recorded by the county detention system. Their desperate attempts to manipulate family members and destroy my credibility had been captured in dozens of recorded conversations. "Listen to this," Marcus said, playing a recording from Saturday evening. Patricia's voice was clearly audible, discussing strategy with Emma during their permitted phone call. "We need to make Alfred sound completely crazy," Patricia's recorded voice instructed. "Tell everyone he's been hearing voices and making up conspiracy theories. If we can get him committed to a psychiatric facility, his testimony becomes worthless in court." Emma's voice responded with cold calculation. "I already called Derek's family and told them Alfred threatened to hurt people. They're starting to believe he's dangerous." The recorded conversation provided irrefutable evidence that Patricia and Emma were knowingly making false accusations about my mental health as part of a deliberate criminal conspiracy to obstruct justice. Sarah smiled grimly as she made notes. "Conspiracy to commit obstruction of justice is a felony that carries additional prison time. They're digging their own graves with every phone call." Our counteroffensive began immediately. Marcus had prepared comprehensive evidence packages for every family member who had been contacted by Patricia and Emma. Bank surveillance footage, handwriting analysis reports, financial records, and expert testimony created an overwhelming case that no rational person could dispute. Grandfather William was our first priority because of his vulnerable position and Patricia's cruel manipulation of his diminished memory. Marcus and I drove to Dallas on Tuesday morning to meet with him at his assisted living facility. "Grandfather, I brought someone to help explain what really happened to the trust fund money," I said gently as we sat in the facility's comfortable visiting room. Marcus spread the evidence across the table methodically, starting with the simplest documents and building toward more complex financial records. Video footage from bank surveillance cameras showed Patricia and Emma making unauthorized withdrawals while I was studying abroad in London. "Mr. Matthews, this is your signature on the original trust fund documents," Marcus explained, pointing to my grandfather's handwriting from 15 years earlier. "And this is Alfred's authentic signature on his college enrollment forms." He then displayed the forged withdrawal slips that Patricia had used to steal my inheritance. These signatures, claiming to be Alfred's, were actually written by Patricia. The handwriting analysis proves that Alfred never authorized these transactions. Grandfather William studied the documents with growing clarity. His engineer's mind, despite his age, could still process logical evidence and recognize patterns. "This signature doesn't look like Alfred's handwriting at all. Patricia has been lying to you about Alfred's mental health," Marcus continued gently. "She's trying to discredit him because she knows these documents prove her guilt." The revelation transformed my grandfather's confusion into righteous anger. Patricia stole the money I saved for Alfred's education. She stole from her own son. Within an hour, Grandfather William was calling other family members to correct the false information Patricia had spread about my supposed mental illness. His credibility and respected position in the family carried significant weight with relatives who had been manipulated by Patricia's lies. Meanwhile, Sarah was pursuing legal remedies to stop Patricia and Emma's obstruction campaign. She filed emergency motions with the court requesting immediate restrictions on their phone and mail privileges based on evidence of ongoing criminal activity. "Your Honor," Sarah argued during Wednesday's hearing, "the defendants are using jail communication systems to commit additional crimes. They're making false accusations about the victim's mental health and attempting to intimidate witnesses." Judge Patricia Coleman reviewed the recorded phone conversations and immediately granted our motion. "The defendants' communication privileges are hereby restricted to contact with their attorneys only. Any further attempts to contact family members or witnesses will result in additional charges. Derek's family provided crucial support for our evidence presentation." James Anderson, Derek's attorney father, had been conducting his own investigation of Emma's background and discovered additional lies she had told throughout their relationship. Emma claimed to have a bachelor's degree in medical administration from the University of Colorado. James reported during our Thursday meeting, "The university has no record of her enrollment. She never attended college at all." Emma's employment history was equally fabricated. The medical office where she claimed to work as an assistant had no record of employing anyone with her name. Her entire professional identity was fictitious, created to attract Derek and his financially stable family. Derek himself became a powerful ally when he realized the full extent of Emma's deception. "I thought I married a college-educated professional woman," he said during his recorded statement for the district attorney. "Instead, I married a career criminal who used me to legitimize her stolen lifestyle." The evidence packages that Marcus distributed to family members systematically destroyed Patricia and Emma's manipulation campaign. Aunt Linda in Phoenix called to apologize after reviewing the bank surveillance footage. "Alfred? I'm so sorry I believed Patricia's lies," Aunt Linda said during her tearful phone call. "The video evidence is absolutely clear. Patricia and Emma are criminals and you're the victim." Similar apologies came from relatives across the country as they reviewed the documented evidence and recognized the systematic nature of Patricia and Emma's fraud scheme. Uncle Paul, cousin Jessica, and Uncle William all contacted me to express their support and outrage about the crimes committed against me. By Friday afternoon, the district attorney's office had received statements from 17 family members confirming that Patricia and Emma had attempted to manipulate them with false information about my mental health. Each statement represented additional evidence of obstruction of justice. The recorded phone conversations from jail provided the most damning evidence of Patricia and Emma's continued criminal activity. In one particularly revealing conversation, Emma instructed Patricia to contact my employer and claim I had been embezzling money from the hospital. Make up something about Alfred stealing drugs from the hospital pharmacy? Emma's recorded voice advised. If we can get him fired and arrested, nobody will believe his testimony about us. The recording demonstrated such callous disregard for my well-being that even Emma's defense attorney recommended accepting a plea bargain rather than facing additional charges at trial. Dr. Martinez at Memorial Hospital received copies of all evidence proving my innocence and immediately reinstated me to full employment with a formal apology. Alfred, we should have investigated Patricia's allegations more thoroughly before taking any action against you. The hospital administration also provided security footage showing that I had never accessed the pharmacy areas that Patricia falsely claimed I had been stealing from. Their statement became additional evidence of Patricia's pattern of making false accusations. By Sunday evening, exactly 1 week after the disastrous wedding reception, Patricia and Emma's counterattack had completely collapsed. Their recorded admissions of lying about my mental health, combined with overwhelming documentary evidence of their crimes, had destroyed any remaining credibility they might have claimed. The district attorney's office called Sarah on Monday morning with an offer that would finally bring closure to 7 years of systematic theft and betrayal. They want to plead guilty to all charges in exchange for reduced sentences and full restitution, Sarah reported. Patricia would serve 4 years in state prison, Emma would serve 2 years, and they would be required to pay complete restitution of all stolen funds plus interest and damages. The offer represented total victory in our legal battle, but more importantly, it meant acknowledgement and validation of the truth I'd been trying to prove for 3 years. Justice was finally within reach. The plea hearing took place on a crisp October morning in Judge Patricia Coleman's courtroom, exactly 6 weeks after the wedding reception that had exposed 7 years of systematic family betrayal. I sat in the front row behind the prosecutor's table, wearing the same navy blue suit I had worn to Emma's wedding, but this time, I felt confident and vindicated rather than nervous and isolated. Patricia entered the courtroom first, wearing an Orange County jail uniform that seemed to diminish her somehow. The woman who had manipulated and controlled our family for so many years now looked small and defeated as she shuffled to the defendant's table in shackles. Her gray hair, which had been perfectly styled for Emma's wedding, hung limp and unkempt around her shoulders. Emma followed behind her mother, also in jail attire, her face pale and drawn from 6 weeks in custody. The radiant bride who had celebrated her dream wedding had been replaced by a convicted felon facing years in prison. Derek was notably absent from the courtroom, having filed for annulment 3 weeks earlier when Emma's lies about her college education and employment history were finally exposed. Judge Coleman reviewed the plea agreement with careful attention to detail. Ms. Matthews, do you understand that by pleading guilty to identity theft, wire fraud, and conspiracy charges, you will be sentenced to 4 years in state prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation? Patricia's voice was barely audible as she responded, "Yes, Your Honor, I understand." "And do you acknowledge that you unlawfully accessed your son Alfred's trust fund and personal accounts, stealing approximately $150,000 over a period of 6 years?" "Yes, Your Honor." Patricia's admission spoken aloud in open court felt like a massive weight being lifted from my chest. After years of being called a liar and accused of mental illness, My mother was finally acknowledging the truth of her crimes. Emma's plea followed the same format. Ms. Matthews Henderson, you are pleading guilty to conspiracy to commit identity theft and fraud. Do you understand that you will serve 2 years in state prison, followed by 2 years of supervised probation? Yes, Your Honor, Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. And do you acknowledge that you participated in your mother's scheme to steal money from your brother's trust fund, and that you used your brother's stolen identity to obtain credit cards and loans? Yes, Your Honor, I did those things. The formal admissions of guilt provided the closure I had been seeking for 3 years. My own family members speaking under oath in a court of law were finally acknowledging the systematic theft and fraud they had committed against me. Judge Coleman turned her attention to the restitution portion of the plea agreement. The defendants will pay full restitution of all stolen funds calculated at $237,000, including the original trust fund amount, fraudulent credit card debt interest, and damages to the victim's credit rating. The restitution amount was significantly higher than my original trust fund because it included years of interest legal fees and the cost of repairing my destroyed credit score. Marcus Sullivan had meticulously documented every financial impact of Patricia and Emma's crimes, ensuring that I would be fully compensated for their betrayal. District Attorney Michael Rodriguez addressed the court regarding the broader impact of the case. Your Honor, this case represents one of the most systematic and callous examples of family financial abuse we have prosecuted. The defendants spent 7 years destroying their own son and brother's financial future while living luxuriously on stolen money. The emotional impact on the victim has been devastating, Rodriguez continued. Mr. Alfred Matthews was forced to abandon his medical school dreams work, multiple minimum wage jobs, and endure years of damaged family relationships because of his mother and sister's criminal conspiracy. Judge Coleman nodded gravely as she prepared to impose formal sentences. Ms. Patricia Matthews, your crimes against your own son represent a profound betrayal of parental trust and responsibility. You systematically stole your son's inheritance and destroyed his credit while manipulating other family members to believe he was mentally ill. Your actions forced your son to abandon his educational goals and struggle financially while you lived in luxury purchased with his stolen money. The court sentences you to 4 years in state prison, 3 years supervised probation, and full restitution as outlined in the plea agreement. Patricia's sentencing felt like the conclusion of a long nightmare. The woman who had raised me taught me right from wrong and claimed to love me unconditionally had been formally held accountable for systematically destroying my life for her own financial benefit. Emma's sentencing followed immediately. Ms. Emma Matthews Henderson, you participated in your mother's criminal conspiracy and continued the fraud even after establishing an independent adult life. Your marriage to Derek Anderson was based on deceptions funded by stolen money from your brother. The court sentences you to 2 years in state prison, 2 years supervised probation, and joint responsibility with your mother for complete restitution to your brother. As the bailiff led Patricia and Emma away in handcuffs, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Justice had been served, but it came at the cost of losing the 2 most important female relationships in my life. They had made their choices, and now they would face the consequences. But the family I had grown up with was permanently destroyed. Outside the courthouse, Marcus Sullivan and Sarah Chen congratulated me on the successful conclusion of our legal battle. Alfred, you should be proud of yourself for having the courage to pursue justice, Sarah said. Many people in your situation would have given up or tried to handle this privately within the family. The evidence was so overwhelming that they had no choice but to plead guilty, Marcus added. Your patience and determination made this victory possible. The restitution payments began immediately as Patricia and Emma's assets were seized and liquidated to compensate me for their crimes. Patricia's house in the exclusive neighborhood, Emma's BMW, and various luxury items purchased with stolen money were sold to generate funds for repayment. More importantly, my credit report was cleared of all fraudulent accounts, and my credit score was restored through court order. The district attorney's office provided official documentation that I had been the victim of identity theft, which allowed me to qualify for student loans and other financial opportunities that had been denied because of my family's crimes. 2 months after the sentencing, I received an unexpected phone call from my grandfather William in Dallas. "Alfred, I've been thinking about everything that happened, and I want to make sure you get the education your father wanted you to have." Grandfather William had established an additional education fund containing $75,000 to replace the life insurance money that Patricia had stolen. "Your father would be proud of how you stood up for yourself and sought justice," he said during our emotional phone conversation. Derek Anderson. Emma's former husband had become an unexpected ally and friend throughout the legal proceedings. Despite the humiliation of discovering that his marriage had been based on lies and fraud, he had provided crucial testimony and emotional support during the most difficult phases of the case. "Alfred, you helped me avoid a lifetime of being married to a criminal," Derek said during one of our regular coffee meetings. "I was completely fooled by Emma's deceptions, but you had the courage to expose the truth even when it cost you family relationships." Derek's friendship meant more to me than he realized. Having someone who understood the complex emotions involved in discovering that people you love and trust have been systematically deceiving you provided invaluable emotional support during my healing process. 6 months after Patricia and Emma's sentencing, I was accepted into medical school at the state university, funded by my restored trust fund, grandfather William's additional education fund, and federal student loans that were finally available with my cleared credit record. Walking across the medical school campus on my first day of classes, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment and gratitude. The dream that my father had envisioned when he established my trust fund was finally becoming reality, despite my family's attempts to destroy it. Dr. Rebecca Martinez from Memorial Hospital had written a strong recommendation letter for my medical school application. "Alfred demonstrated remarkable character and integrity throughout a very difficult personal situation," she wrote. "His ability to pursue justice while maintaining professional responsibilities shows the kind of ethical foundation that will make him an excellent physician." The medical school orientation included a session on professional ethics and integrity. As I listened to the dean discuss the importance of honesty and trustworthiness in medical practice, I realized that my experience with family betrayal had actually prepared me to better understand the ethical challenges that healthcare professionals face. My first-year medical school classes were challenging, but deeply satisfying. Studying anatomy, physiology, and pathology felt like reclaiming the future that had been stolen from me. Every exam I passed and every clinical skill I mastered represented victory over the family members who had tried to prevent my success. During my second semester, I received a letter from Emma in prison. She had been incarcerated for 8 months and was participating in financial crimes counseling as part of her rehabilitation program. "Alfred, I know my apology can't undo the damage I caused, but I want you to know that I understand now how wrong I was," Emma wrote. "The counseling program has helped me see how my choices hurt not just you, but Derek, his family, and everyone who trusted me. I was jealous of your intelligence and potential, and instead of working to improve myself, I chose to tear you down. I stole your opportunities because I was afraid of being left behind. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I wanted you to know that I recognize the pain I caused." Emma's letter represented the beginning of accountability and potential redemption for her, but I wasn't ready to forgive or rebuild our relationship. The trust that had been broken couldn't be repaired simply through an apology, no matter how sincere it might be. Patricia never wrote or attempted to contact me during her incarceration. According to Uncle Robert, she continued to maintain that her actions had been justified because she was protecting the family from my supposed financial irresponsibility. Her unwillingness to accept full responsibility for her crimes made any future relationship impossible. As I progressed through medical school, I specialized in emergency medicine, partly because my experience working as a medical technician had given me valuable practical skills. More importantly, emergency medicine attracted me because it involved helping people during crisis situations when they needed advocacy and support. My personal experience with family betrayal and systematic fraud had taught me to recognize signs of elder abuse, financial manipulation, and domestic violence that other healthcare providers might miss. I became known among my clinical supervisors for my ability to connect with patients who were experiencing complex family and financial problems. During my third year of medical school, I was invited to speak at a conference about family financial fraud and identity theft. Standing at the podium before an audience of attorneys, law enforcement officers, and social workers, I shared my story publicly for the first time since the wedding reception confrontation. Family financial abuse is devastating because it destroys both your financial security and your emotional trust, I explained to the conference attendees. Victims often struggle to seek help because they feel guilty about pursuing legal action against family members. The most important thing I learned from my experience is that seeking justice isn't about revenge or punishment. It's about holding people accountable for their choices and protecting yourself from continued victimization. The conference presentation led to opportunities to counsel other victims of family financial fraud. Many people contacted me after hearing my story, describing similar experiences with parents, siblings, or children who had stolen their identities and destroyed their credit. Your courage to pursue criminal charges gave me the strength to file my own police report, one woman wrote after attending my presentation. My daughter had been stealing from my retirement account for 3 years, and I thought I had to protect her by staying silent. Helping other victims find the strength to seek justice became an important part of my personal healing process. Each person I counseled who successfully recovered stolen funds or obtained protection from family fraud represented validation that my decision to expose Patricia and Emma's crimes had been correct. 5 years after the wedding reception confrontation, I graduated from medical school with honors and began my residency in emergency medicine at the same hospital where I'd worked as a medical technician. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was now treating patients in the same emergency department where Patricia had tried to destroy my reputation by claiming I was stealing drugs. Dr. Martinez, who had become a mentor and friend, attended my medical school graduation ceremony. "Alfred, I've watched you transform a terrible family betrayal into motivation for helping other people," she said during the celebration dinner. "Your father would be incredibly proud of the man you've become." Derek Anderson also attended my graduation, bringing his new fiancée, Rachel, whom he had met 2 years after his annulment from Emma was finalized. "Alfred, you saved my life by exposing Emma's fraud," Derek said during his congratulatory speech. "If you hadn't had the courage to reveal the truth, I would have spent years married to someone who was systematically destroying my financial future." Rachel added, "Derek told me your entire story, and I think you're incredibly brave." Standing up to family members requires a special kind of strength that most people don't possess. The graduation ceremony represented the culmination of a 7-year journey from family betrayal to professional achievement. Wearing my medical school graduation regown surrounded by friends and mentors who supported my dreams, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude for the opportunity to reclaim the future my father had envisioned for me. My residency supervisor, Dr. James Park, offered me additional perspective on my experience during our first evaluation meeting. "Alfred, your background gives you unique insight into how personal crises affect patients' health and well-being. You understand trauma and recovery in ways that most physicians never will. The financial restitution from Patricia and Emma had been completely paid through asset seizure and garnishment of their prison work wages. My trust fund was fully restored, plus interest and damages, providing a solid financial foundation for beginning my medical career without debt. More importantly, my credit score had been fully restored, and all fraudulent accounts had been permanently removed from my financial records. The legal documentation of my victimization would protect me from any future attempts to hold me responsible for Patricia and Emma's crimes. Uncle Robert maintained contact throughout my medical school years, serving as a bridge between me and the extended family members who had initially believed Patricia's lies about my mental health. The whole family understands now that Patricia manipulated all of us, Uncle Robert explained during one of our regular phone calls. Everybody feels terrible about doubting you initially. Patricia was very convincing when she claimed you were having mental health problems. We should have investigated her claims more carefully before turning against you. Grandfather William lived to see my medical school graduation despite his advancing age and declining health. During our final conversation before his death, he expressed pride in my perseverance and character. Alfred, your father, gave you more than money when he established the trust fund, Grandfather William said during his last visit. He gave you an example of working hard and planning for the future. Patricia stole your money, but she couldn't steal your character or determination. The education you're getting now is something nobody can ever take away from you. Use it to help people and make your father proud. As I reflected on the entire experience 7 years after that devastating wedding reception, I realized that Patricia and Emma's betrayal had ultimately strengthened me in ways I never could have anticipated. Their crimes had forced me to develop resilience, independence, and advocacy skills that made me a better physician and person. The painful lesson I learned was that family relationships based on manipulation and deception aren't worth preserving at any cost. Sometimes protecting yourself requires the courage to expose people you love when they're harming you, even if it means losing those relationships permanently. But I also learned that justice and truth eventually prevail when you have the persistence to document evidence and seek help from qualified professionals. My alliance with attorney Sarah Chen and investigator Marcus Sullivan had been crucial to achieving a successful outcome. Most importantly, I discovered that recovering from family betrayal requires building new relationships with people who support your goals and values. Derek Anderson, Dr. Martinez, Uncle Robert, Grandfather William, and my medical school colleagues had become my chosen family, providing the love and encouragement that Patricia and Emma had withdrawn. Standing in the emergency department during my first week as a resident physician treating patients who were experiencing their own family and financial crises, I felt profound gratitude for the journey that had brought me to this point. The trust fund that my father had established to secure my education had ultimately served its purpose, despite Patricia and Emma's attempts to destroy it. I was finally becoming the doctor my father had envisioned when he planned for my future, and no amount of family betrayal could diminish that achievement. The wedding reception confrontation that had seemed like the most humiliating moment of my life had actually been the beginning of my liberation from a toxic family dynamic that was preventing my success. Sometimes the most painful experiences lead to the most important growth and positive change. Justice had been served. My future had been reclaimed. And I had learned that the strongest families are often the ones you choose rather than the ones you're born into. Thank you for listening to my story about standing up for justice when family members betray your trust. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family loyalty and protecting yourself from financial abuse? How did you find the courage to seek help when people you loved were harming you? Please share your thoughts in the comments below, like this story. If it resonated with your own experiences, subscribe to hear more stories about overcoming family betrayal, and share this with anyone who might be struggling with similar situations. Remember that seeking justice isn't about revenge. It's about holding people accountable and protecting your future. Stay strong, document everything, and never be afraid to fight for what's rightfully yours.